So, we've got this character, this space marine, right? Demetrian Titus. And on the surface, he sounds like any other superhuman warrior, genetically engineered, super strong, all that. But what makes Titus so interesting is he seems to be immune to the corrupting powers of chaos.
Yeah, it's that resistance to chaos that really makes his story stand out, especially when you consider his background, his chapter. He's an ultramarine, right? And they're known for being, pretty by the book. Strict adherence to the Codex Astartes,
Yeah, the Codex, the ultimate rule book for the space marine.
Exactly. Every action, every tactic, it's all laid out in the Codex. But Titus, he's a bit different.
Yeah, he follows it, obviously. But he seems to understand that sometimes you need to think outside the box, adapt to the situation.
He's more about the spirit of the law, you could say, than the letter of the law.
Yeah.
And that really comes through in some of his early stories, especially his first encounter with chaos.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He comes face to face with a chaos sorcerer.
As a young space marine.
I mean, these sorcerers, they're psychers.
Yeah, powerful psychers. Twisted by the warp, wielding all kinds of dark magic.
And Titus's entire squad gets wiped out, but he survives.
Not only survives, but manages to kill the sorcerer. He's badly injured in the process, but still pretty remarkable, right?
It's almost unheard of for a space marine to survive direct exposure to that kind of warp energy.
I mean, most would succumb to corruption almost instantly.
But Titus, he makes a full recovery.
It's like he has this innate resistance to the corrupting power of chaos.
And that resilience, it becomes a defining characteristic for him. He shows up again and again throughout his career. You see it in his combat record, too. I mean, the guy racks up some pretty impressive victories.
Some truly remarkable victories. He takes on 3 Eldar aspect warriors, those elite specialists, and wins.
Single-handedly.
Single-handedly.
Then on Graia, the Forge World.
Vital for the Imperium's war machine.
He leads the charge against Orc war boss Grimskull, a brutal Orc leader, right?
Known for his ferocity.
And Titus takes him down.
Then there's the liberation of Graia. He plays a key role there, too. Ultimately confronts the Chaos Sorcerer, Nemeroth, the mastermind behind the planet's invasion.
It's like he's this unstoppable force.
Yeah, and you can see how that kind of success, combined with that immunity to chaos, would start to raise some eyebrows.
Right. Makes you wonder, were there always whispers?
Doubts.
Suspicions.
Oh, absolutely. And one space marine, in particular, Leandros, he starts to get really uneasy about Titus.
Leandros, another ultramarine.
Yeah, and a real stickler for the rules. Sees Titus's flexibility as a weakness, maybe even a sign of instability.
And after Graia, Leandros's concerns reach a boiling point.
He goes to the Inquisition.
The Inquisition, that's a huge escalation. I mean, they're the Imperium's secret police, right?
Tasked with rooting out heresy. And they have a reputation.
Yeah, not known for their leniency.
To be reported to the Inquisition by your own brother in arms, it's gotta be devastating.
What happens to Titus?
Well, he's arrested, imprisoned, and then subjected to, let's just say it wasn't a pleasant experience.
The Inquisition's methods can be pretty brutal, right?
Inquisitor Thrax, the one in charge of Titus's case, he was known for being particularly harsh.
And this interrogation, these tests, they go on for a long time.
A century.
A century. Wow, that's longer than most Space Marines even live.
Imagine the psychological toll. A century of constant scrutiny, suspicion, testing.
And they don't find anything.
Nothing. No trace of chaos. No corruption. Titus's loyalty is unblemished.
But even though he's cleared, a century of that kind of treatment, that has to leave a mark.
It changes him.
It's like he comes out of this ordeal, and the world's moved on without him.
The chapter he knew, it's not the same.
He's a ghost, a relic of a past that no one wants to remember.
He's deemed loyal, but he feels like an outsider. And so he decides to embrace a new path. He joins the Death Watch.
The Death Watch. Now that's an interesting turn. They're like the ultimate Xenos hunters, right?
Drawn from different chapters, all specialists in fighting alien threats.
A long way from the rigid structure of the Ultramarines.
He takes on the mantle of a Black Shield. A Death Watch warrior with no known chapter. He becomes Nullus.
Nullus. It's like he's trying to erase his past.
Disappear into the shadows.
But even in the Death Watch, he doesn't escape his past.
The galaxy is thrown into chaos, the Great Rift opens, the Tyranids launch a massive invasion, the Fourth Tyrannic War.
In Titus, he finds himself fighting alongside his former chapter once more.
Against impossible odds.
He's gravely wounded.
Near death.
And that's when Chief Librarian Tigurius arrives.
One of the most powerful psychers in the Ultramarines.
I bet Tigurius sensed something. some echo of Titus's presence.
He recognizes him, orders him brought aboard the Ultramarines' battle barge for treatment, but his wounds, they're severe.
So they do something drastic.
The Rubicon Primaris, they turn him into a Primaris Marine.
Larger, stronger, even more resilient. It's like a rebirth.
A second chance. But it's not going to be an easy return.
No, I imagine not. There's a lot of baggage there. A lot of unresolved history.
Suspicion.
Doubt.
He's back, but is he truly home?
It's a question that hangs over him. And it's a question that's going to shape his future. So Titus is back with the Ultramarines, but still feels kind of like an outsider, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's been through so much.
And now he's a Primaris Marine, under the command of a younger captain. You gotta wonder how he feels about all that.
A lot of change to process, but it doesn't really matter because the galaxy waits for no one and the Tyranids are still out there. Which brings us to the Residius campaign. This was a turning point, not just for Titus, but for the whole chapter.
The Tyranid threat was escalating. Right, they were pushing harder than ever.
Exactly. But there was another layer to this conflict, something more insidious. The Thousand Sons were involved.
Ah, the Thousand Sons. Now they're a Chaos Space Marine Legion. Right. Devoted to scenage, the change of ways.
Masters of sorcery and manipulation. Their presence in the Residius system was a big deal. It meant there was something specific they were after.
Something more than just conquering territory.
And that something turned out to be Project Aurora.
Project Aurora. Now you've got to tell me more about this because it sounds like a game changer.
It was a top-secret initiative spearheaded by the Mechanicus. Their goal was to create a weapon powerful enough to turn the tide of the war. A weapon that could stop the Tyranids.
So far, so good.
But here's the twist. They were using a chaos artifact to build it.
Wait, a chaos artifact? Like the very thing they're supposed to be fighting against?
Yep. A remnant of the same artifact Titus destroyed on Graia. The one that caused so much chaos and corruption.
Wow, that's incredible. Talk about fighting fire with fire. Or maybe, in this case, fighting chaos with chaos.
It was a desperate gamble, and a dangerous one. The Mechanicus were playing with forces they didn't fully understand, and Titus, he knew it. He'd seen the corrupting power of that artifact firsthand.
So what did he do?
He tried to warn his superiors. He told them about the risks, the potential for disaster. But remember, he's still under suspicion. He spent a century under interrogation by the Inquisition.
So no one believes him. They just think he's, I don't know, traumatized, paranoid.
Exactly. His warnings fall on deaf ears.
That's got to be frustrating. Knowing the truth, seeing the danger, but being powerless to stop it.
It's a classic tragic hero setup. And meanwhile, the Thousand Sons are making their move.
They want to get their hands on Project Aurora.
Oh, yeah. Imagine the power of a chaos artifact, amplified by Mechanicus technology. It would be devastating. They could reshape reality itself.
And in the middle of all this, we have Titus, caught between the Tyranids, the Thousand Sons, and his own chapter, who still don't fully trust him.
It's a powder keg waiting to explode. And then, to make things even more complicated, Leandros shows up.
Leandros, the same one who reported Titus to the Inquisition.
The very same. He's now Chaplain Quintus, a spiritual leader within the Ultramarines. He confronts Titus, acknowledges his apparent loyalty, but then delivers this chilling warning. He basically says, if you step out of line, if you show any sign of corruption, I'll be the one to end you.
Wow. Talk about intense.
It's a reminder that Titus is still walking a tightrope. One wrong move, and he's done for.
So we've got Titus caught in the middle of this three-way conflict, right? You've got the Tyranids just relentless, just devouring everything in their path. And then there are the Thousand Sons manipulating everyone, trying to grab this incredibly powerful weapon. And right in the center of it all is Titus. His own chapter still doesn't quite trust him. It really highlights how in Warhammer 40K, it's not just about fighting the enemy in front of you. It's also about those internal struggles, those suspicions and doubts that can tear you apart from the inside.
Yeah, and Titus, his story really embodies that internal struggle, doesn't it? That constant fight against corruption, and not just the physical corruption of chaos, but the corruption of faith, the erosion of trust. Can you imagine having your loyalty questioned constantly, every action scrutinized for some hint of heresy? It's amazing that he keeps fighting, that he holds on to his beliefs.
It really makes you think about faith, about obedience, especially in a system as rigid as the Imperium with its Space Marines and their Codex. We talked about how the Ultramarines are famous for their strict adherence to the Codex of Sardes, but Titus shows that sometimes blind obedience isn't enough. Sometimes you need flexibility, you need intuition to actually win the day.
His story goes way beyond just fighting the Tyranids or the Thousand Sons. He's grappling with these really complex moral dilemmas, situations where the line between right and wrong gets blurry. Take Project Aurora, for example, using a chaos artifact to fight chaos. I mean, how messed up is that?
Yeah, it's that moral grayness that makes Titus's story so interesting. He's forced to make these tough choices, knowing that whatever he does will have huge consequences. There are no easy answers in the 41st millennium, and Titus, he forces us to confront that. What does it even mean to be loyal in this kind of universe? What does it mean to have faith when everything around you is trying to break you?
But in the end, Titus finds a kind of redemption, not necessarily in the eyes of the Ultramarines or even the Imperium, but in his own belief in himself. He doesn't need anyone's approval, he just does what he believes is right, even when everyone doubts him. And that's a powerful message, It's something we can all take away from his story.
Titus's story really stays with you. He's a hero, but he's constantly being tested. Can you ever truly escape the shadows of doubt, the whispers of suspicion? And how do you stay true to yourself, to your beliefs, when everything is pushing you to compromise? It's something to think about, even outside of the Warhammer universe, right?
In a galaxy consumed by war, by darkness, Titus is like this little spark of hope. He shows us that even when everything seems lost, the human spirit can survive, it can find strength, it can even find redemption. And that's a message worth remembering, I think. No matter how grim things get, there's always a chance for things to get better. There's always a reason to keep fighting.